Hey guys, it's Matt the Bowtie Guy. Today's topic, sleep. Hey guys, it's Matt the Bowtie Guy. Today's topic, sleep. But first, I want to talk about Novel Knots Bow Ties, who graciously gifted me with this beautiful bow tie here. All of their bow ties are upcycled fabrics, so they take used fabrics and turn them into bow ties, which is awesome. You know, our lives aren't just about health and wellness, but it's also about sustainability. And so, you know, it's a great company. They were gracious and sent me this bow tie, asked for a shout out. The fabric is incredible. It's a nice firm fabric, holds its shape really well. It's a great tie, and you know, when you're tying ties and saving lives one knot at a time, it's important to have that shape still held in place. So I just want to give a shout out to them, guys. I'll have a link in the description below. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and hit that bell down there. All right, guys, let's talk about some sleep today. About 80% of US adults usually will have at least one night a week where they can't fall asleep at all. And about 7 to 10% of adults will complain of some sort of sleep disorder at some point within their life. That's a huge number of people. Myself included, I've had those nights where I just can't fall asleep, or I have a restless night of sleep, I'm waking up, I'm falling back asleep, or I just can't put a finger on it, but I'm tired throughout the day. Can't focus, I'm agitated, I'm sad, I have no energy, I can't retain any information. We've all been there. So, sleep is super important. It's just as important as breathing, eating, and drinking water. So, it's a vital essential for life. It's good for your mental health, it's good for your physical well-being, and so I think it's a really important topic that we discuss. So, there's 5 cycles of sleep, just about, and each cycle is 90 minutes. So you figure 5 cycles, 90 minutes, that's 450 minutes, which translates to 7.5 hours. That's where we get the 7 to 8 hours of sleep each day that is recommended.
No way!
Now granted, some people need a little bit more, especially young children. Some people need a little bit less, but for the most part, if you can get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, that is the ideal amount of sleep that the human body requires for optimal functioning. Yeah, I know, I've been on call, I've worked multiple days of shift at a time, I've gone 3 hours of sleep and feel perfectly fine the next day to see patients. In actuality, it's not good. I always used to say, yeah, I only need 4 to 5 hours of sleep and I'll be okay. In actuality, that's not true. I feel groggy, I'm tired, I'm run down, and usually I'm pretty cranky. So whoever says that, they're lying to you. They might feel okay, but in the long run, they're doing themselves harm. So let's talk about these stages of sleep. So the first cycle of sleep is pre-sleep. Your eyes are closed, you're nodding off, but you're easily woken up. The slightest, movement, physical stimulus of touch, any sound, boom, you're up, you're awake, and you're aware of your surroundings. When you move on to the next cycle of sleep, that's when you start to enter a very light sleep. A little bit deeper, but you're not in a deep sleep. You're still easily woken up. If you hear a dog barking outside, if you fall asleep on the couch and the TV's going, and there's a noise that suddenly changes or is a little bit louder than usual, if someone calls your name, you're going to pop up and awake. That makes sense. These are non-REM sleep cycles. And so, as you start to progress down, you then enter in the third cycle of sleep. This is your slow wave sleep. You're slipping deeper, your brain waves, your brain activity is starting to slow down. You're kind of about to hit the runway. Everything's good. You're almost into REM sleep. In the fourth cycle of sleep, the brain kind of reverts back to that second stage of sleep where activity starts to come about a little bit more. And that's in preparation to enter REM sleep. Once you're in REM sleep, that's rapid eye movement, REM. It's when your eye movement gets really fast, but then your muscle tone gets very, very relaxed. That's when you kind of melt into a puddle. You have now slipped into a deep slumber, and this is when dreams happen. You're flying over a city, you're sitting in a classroom in your underwear, or you have that weird dream where you can't talk or people just can't hear you no matter how loud you yell. We've all had these weird dreams. But this is the time when it happens, in the deep REM sleep. Then, as you start to go through that, 90 minutes later, you start to wake up, your activation system kicks in, and then boom, you're awake. So those are the 5 cycles of sleep. And the reason why I say this is because part of it is if you're not getting enough sleep, you're disrupting one of those spots in the cycle, and so you can't recharge the batteries. It's almost like when you have your phone plugged into the wall, and then all of a sudden, 20 minutes in, you unplug it. It's not going to charge, right? You may have gotten to 40% on your phone. Yeah, that might get you a couple hours worth of work or whatever it may be, scrolling through Instagram or Facebook or phone calls or texts, but in the end, it's going to die a lot quicker. However, if you left it plugged in for the full amount of charging time, you let it go through all those charging cycles, it's going to work properly. Your body's the same way. So if you disrupt that cycle at a certain point, that's when you're going to start to have a problem. Now, take into consideration naps. I don't really recommend naps, but if you're going to nap, 15 to 20 minutes, 30 minutes tops is all I would recommend, because that's when you start to enter into those cycles. And if you sleep more than that, you're going to disrupt it. You're going to feel groggy, tired, and you're not going to like the way you feel. So it's important to understand those 5 cycles of sleep, because if you're not getting enough sleep, that's what's going to happen. You're not recharging those batteries properly. Now, the other part of sleep that's really important is something called your circadian rhythm. Your body is able to understand time within a 24-hour period. It understands day, it understands night, it knows cycles, and your body loves patterns. And what's really important about this is if you fall asleep at 3 a.m., despite getting 8 hours of sleep, your body is still not going to like it, because it knows you probably should have been asleep a long time before then. We are not nocturnal creatures, we are not cats or other bats or things like that, so when you get to bed a lot later than kind of what the norm is, then, you're going to disrupt that cycle and that rhythm. And when you disrupt a pattern that your body likes and kind of prefers, it's not going to do you any good. You're going to feel pretty lousy. So, that's why it's important to get to sleep at a reasonable hour. Now, having worked overnight shifts, having worked 16-hour overnight shifts, it's unavoidable for some people. So getting the amount of sleep, that 7 to 8 hours, is crucial in terms of recharging those batteries. It's probably best if you do go to bed at a reasonable hour and not stay up till 1, 2, 3 a.m. in the morning and then sleep in until the next afternoon. It's not going to do your body any good. Okay, so what can cause sleep disruptions or insomnia or just difficulty sleeping in general? So there's a multitude of things that can cause this. The most common ones are stress.
You look a little stressed.
Oh, I'm stressed.
Anxiety, and lack of exercise, excessive amounts of caffeine. Certain types of medications can keep you awake at night if you're on any prescription medications, or even some over-the-counter medications. First take a look to see if there's anything that's out of the norm for you that has been triggered recently when the sleep issues started. So if you know that all of a sudden things at work have been a lot more stressful than usual.
Talking about stress? We're talking about stress, okay? I've stumbled onto a major company conspiracy, Mac. How about that for stress?
And you haven't been sleeping that well, you might want to think about that and say, oh, that's kind of weird. I got this new project I'm supposed to be working on 2 weeks ago, but I couldn't sleep. So, put 2 and 2 together. I know it sounds stupid and common sense, but this often gets overlooked. I'll have patients who come in and they say, Matt, I can't sleep. The past month, I cannot go to bed. Or if I do fall asleep, I'm up 2 hours later and I cannot go back to bed. And a lot of times, as we talk about things, they realize, oh, this has been going on at home, or, this family member is sick, or I'm really stressed about this thing at work. And so that kind of comes to light, and it's a good way to figure out what's triggering that type of sleep issue. Now, there are some other conditions that can disrupt sleep. I won't get into them too deeply here. I can certainly make another video for it. One is obstructive sleep apnea or central sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is when you stop breathing in your sleep. And then sometimes you can have what's called hypopnea, where you breathe very shallow and irregularly in your sleep. And when that happens, what's being triggered is this response in the brain. When you stop breathing, obviously the oxygen levels in your blood start to drop. Once they drop, then your brain panics. It has a threshold. Once it gets below about 89 to 88%, your body goes into emergency mode and your brain wakes up. You might not wake up, but your brain does. And so in these patients, I've sent many patients for sleep studies, or what we call polysomnograms, and what happens is we see that these patients are waking up hundreds of times a night because their oxygen is dipping way too low. I've had some patients where their oxygen has dropped as low as 50%. That's insane. If you had 50% oxygen while you were awake, you'd be rushed to the emergency room immediately and they'd be figuring out what's going on. So, sleep apnea is certainly something that can come about. Some risk factors include, if you have a lot of sinus or tonsillar issues, so your anatomy blocks your airway, your tongue can fall back and occlude or kind of hold up that airway, and so then you stop breathing in your sleep, especially if you sleep on your back, and then you wake up consciously to breathe again, or your brain wakes up to have a deeper breath taken. Another cause, obesity. If you're overweight or you have a larger neck circumference, that can cause a little bit of difficulty sleeping at night, especially on your back. That can lead to sleep apnea. There's a multitude of things. Certain medications, they can suppress your respiratory drive. So in other words, they tell your brain to not breathe as heavily. A lot of times this is things like Ativan, Xanax, Klonopin, so benzodiazepines, or narcotics, pain medicines. Oxycodone, codeine, Vicodin, methadone, things like that. So if you're on some of those medications and you're having these issues with sleep, or you just feel tired all the time and you can't concentrate, talk to your primary care provider. That could be the culprit, and it may be time to talk about coming off those medications, switching to an alternative, or just getting a sleep study to figure out what's going on. Another condition is something called periodic limb movement disorder. And this is when, your arm can move, your legs move, and you're almost moving around the bed and you're fidgeting. Your brain is waking up. You have all these kind of awakenings mentally. You yourself aren't waking up, but your brain is. So once again, it's like taking that iPhone charger, putting it in the wall, unplugging it, putting in, unplugging it, putting in, and unplugging it. It's not going to charge. You might get a little bit of juice, but it's not going to do anything overall. So those are typically the most common causes. There are obviously a ton of other things. Thyroid disease, low testosterone in men, menopause, perimenopause in women, hormone fluctuations in premenopausal women. There's a lot of different things that can cause sleep disruptions from an organic physiologic sense. But for the most part, there's a lot of environmental factors that you yourself can try and alter to make yourself feel better. So let's talk about sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is how you can adapt your lifestyle to optimize the conditions for sleep. So in other words, preparing yourself to get the best sleep possible. So one of the first things, like I talked about before, is a pattern. Your body loves patterns and routines. So what better way to do that than to create a routine that's consistent that you can do every single night. So try and keep a consistent bedtime around the same time, roughly within the same hour every night. And this includes the weekends. When you go to bed at 10 o'clock every day, your body's going to love it. It's going to know, 10 o'clock, time to go to bed. Unfortunately, if you're out on the weekends and you're going out till 2 a.m., you're staying up till midnight, you're going out with your friends, you're spending time with your family, whatever it may be.
We're good, streaky! Yes!
If you're disrupting that on the weekends, it's going to throw that whole routine off. And so it's best if you keep the same bedtime every single night, weekends included. Now, on the other side of that is keeping the same time to get up every single morning, including the weekends.
What?
That's right, not being able to sleep in on the weekends. I know it sounds ridiculous, but if you set an appropriate bedtime, you're going to get an adequate amount of sleep. And so this way, waking up at that same time every day will be easy, and you will sleep a lot better. So keep that routine, same bedtime every day, same wake up time every day. The other thing to help with that is keep a routine. Try and establish something that you do every single night, whether it's reading a book before you go to bed and then brushing your teeth and then washing your face. Whatever you feel is going to be the best routine for you of things that you typically need to do, set a particular order. Have that be your routine, and that can help facilitate sleep as well. The other important thing, an hour before bed, have it be quiet time. No screens, that's right. Get rid of these phones, turn off the TV, shut the laptop, close the iPad. All of those screens emit something called blue light, which can trigger your eyes and your brain to say, hey, it's time to be awake. And so by turning that off, having some quiet time, a dimly lit room, reading a magazine, reading a paper book, yes, I know it's very antiquated, but at the same time, it is really important to let things settle down, let your eyes rest, let your brain calm down. You can do something that's a little monotonous, fold laundry, clean the kitchen counters, just something low-key and relaxed that's going to let everything slow down to the point where your body knows, okay, it's time to go to bed. The other thing too is don't do any strenuous activity or exercise, within an hour or two of going to bed. Especially exercise. If your heart rate's elevated, your blood's pumping, your muscles are full of blood and oxygen, your body's going to want to move. It's going to want to be active. It's going to be awake. It doesn't make sense to do that. So if you can push that activity to a couple hours before you go to bed, that's your best bet. So do that. The other thing to do is to avoid having a large meal or even a snack sometimes before bed. If you can avoid a large meal about 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed, that's ideal. Everything has emptied out of the stomach into the small intestine. It's already begun to digest, and so it's not going to wake you up. You're not going to get this giant spike of sugar in your blood, and your body's not going to be wired for energy. So definitely avoid that. It'll also help prevent any issues with gastric reflux. It'll help with any indigestion, nausea, things like that. So it's best to avoid eating a large meal or a heavy snack before bed. Another thing is alcohol. So some people use alcohol to fall asleep. Oh, I'll have a glass of wine, or I'll have a beer, or I'll have a scotch on the rocks right before I go to bed. It usually helps me fall asleep.
Lift your bottle and share a toast to whatever it is that keeps you thirsting for more.
Well, in actuality, alcohol has a really short half-life. It might knock you out in the short term. It's going to wire you awake in the long run. And so after about an hour or two, you're going to be up. So I do not recommend drinking before bed. It will make your sleep 10 times worse. I know some people say, oh man, I sleep great after a glass of wine or after a few drinks. That may be true, but it could be the fact that you drank so much that you passed out. Or it could be the fact that there's other constituting factors. You've been up for an entire day, and then you went out all night, you ate, you drank, and now you've gone 18 hours on no sleep, and now it's time for your body to crash. And so that's probably why you're able to sleep if you go out drinking, but I would not recommend alcohol. It will keep you awake. Stimulants. So I know there's medications out there, Adderall, Ritalin, Concerta, things like that. We as primary care providers are aware of those things, that they can disrupt your sleep. So it's something we monitor when you're on those for an extended period of time. But I'm actually talking about nicotine and caffeine. So nicotine, cigarettes, vaping, chewing tobacco, things like that, that can actually keep you awake. So if you do smoke or use dip or anything like that, I would really push it back a good amount of time prior to bed. I wouldn't have a cigarette before you go to bed. It's going to keep you awake. And then as for caffeine, caffeine can last in your system for up to 8 hours. And, if you're a postmenopausal woman or you're an older individual, 60 years, 65 or and above, the caffeine can last actually longer, sometimes 12 to 14 hours. So having caffeine, it can accumulate and it can keep you up. So even if you have a cup of coffee or an energy drink or soda in the afternoon, that can linger and prevent you from falling asleep.
Of course I've been up all night. Not because of caffeine, it was insomnia. I couldn't stop thinking about coffee. I need a nap.
Now you might be able to finally fall asleep and stay asleep because the caffeine finally wore off, but if you have it late enough, you're not going to be able to do either. So I would limit, if you can, caffeine, and if you're going to do it earlier in the day. Of course, I would recommend eliminating nicotine because of its overall health detriments. But if you're unable to quit smoking and such, then I would definitely keep it on the earlier side so it doesn't keep you up at night. Another great way to help ensure you fall asleep, go outside. Spend some time out in nature if you can. If you're in the middle of the city like I am, I love going to one of the ponds here in the Boston area. I love walking through parks. I love going to the Arboretum here. Just being out in nature has been shown to be just as effective as counseling and therapy and some antidepressants. So that can create some peace within your mind, help relieve stress, and just boost your overall morale and mood. And so if you do that, some of that stress is going to melt away and it might be easier to sleep. And then to add to that, exercise. That's right. If you exercise, you're going to burn the fuel in your body so that by the time the day is over, there's no gas left in the tank. You have to fall asleep. And so your body wants to sleep. And so this way, if you're exercising, you're going to fall asleep. I know on the days that I go for a run or I have a nice heavy workout at the gym, I work for the day and I come home, sleeping is easy. Exercise also relieves stress. It also helps improve mood. It boosts endorphins, happy hormones. And so all of these things are going to work in your favor. They're going to help you fall asleep. So exercise and get some time outside in nature, and that'll help boost your ability to sleep. Now, ideal circumstances for your bedroom. You should remove as many electronics as possible, especially things that emit Wi-Fi signals, any type of Bluetooth, things like that. There's some studies that suggest that it can disrupt sleep, but overall, blue light, that's the issue. You know, if your cell phone's there, if you have a TV there, if you turn it off, they can still emit blue light that can create disruptions in your sleep. So if you kind of remove all of those stimulatory electronics from your room, especially the bedroom where you're sleeping, you're going to sleep a lot better. I know when I put my phone and I'm not on call and I put it in my living room to charge and there's no other electronics around me, I sleep like a baby. On the days that I am on call, it could be that I'm on call and getting phone calls or the panic of getting a phone call that's keeping me awake. But the fact of having my phone in the room or some sort of electronic device there, I typically don't sleep as well. And that's anecdotal, but research does show that if you have electronics in the room, it's likely that you're probably not going to get as good of sleep as if there were no electronics in the room. In terms of temperature, your body loves it nice and cool. I know personally, the colder the better. Even in the winter, I keep a little crack in the window. Sometimes I have a little fan going. But that is my preference. It doesn't have to be freezing cold, but a nice cooler room, not hot. That'll help improve your sleep. The other thing, dark, quiet. If you can keep your room really dark, get some of those blinder shades that keep it pitch black, or sleep with a sleep mask like you saw in the intro of the video, that can really help. Because our bodies are meant to fall asleep when it gets dark and wake up when it's light. And so if you can mimic that, perfect. And so the quiet aspect is you don't want to disrupt those early stages of sleep. Like I said, there's pre-sleep and light sleep and non-REM sleep. All of those things, you can be aroused very easily to sound. And so if there's a car driving by, if someone honks the horn, if a dog barks, if a trash can tips over from a raccoon or something outside, you're going to wake up. So if you have a loud environment and you're unable to soundproof your room in some way, then get earplugs.
Can you earmuff it for me?
They work great. They're super cheap, and you'll sleep like a baby. So cold, dark, and quiet. That's the best way to do it. Now, for those of you who work late night shifts, overnight shifts, those police officers, firefighters, EMTs, nurses, docs, anyone who works an overnight shift, if you have trouble sleeping, it is difficult. I have lived it as a nurse. I have lived it as an NP. It is not fun to have a late or overnight shift. So there are some things you can do to help kind of improve that. One of them is, making sure that you have that set schedule. So knowing when you're going to fall asleep and wake up and keep that consistent with your schedule. That's going to be one way to help ensure you're getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Now, I did say naps, they're not the greatest, but when you're working in a shift, if you can take some naps, and work it around your shifts to get the adequate amount of sleep, that helps. It's rare, but on an overnight shift, I have taken a 15 to 20 minute nap just to kind of recharge my battery so I'm not frazzled when you get that 2 a.m. rush in the emergency room or the hospital admissions, things like that. So sometimes naps can be helpful to kind of recharge, reset. So if you need to, you certainly can. But like I said, I wouldn't do any more than 30 minutes. You're just going to be tired and groggy. While you're at work, keep things bright. Unfortunately, in some settings, it's hard to do. If you're a first responder, you're especially a police officer, you're out in the cruiser, you're on patrol, that type of thing. it's going to be dark out. It's hard to keep things bright. But if you're able to, and sometimes even with nurses it's hard because we try and keep the floors dark and quiet for the patients so they can rest overnight. But if you can, keep the lights bright. That'll tell your brain this is the time to be awake. And then when you do go home or it's time for you to sleep, then you can create a dark, quiet environment so that it seems as though it's nighttime and you need to go to bed. Something I used to do is after I'd finished my shift in the ER overnight, I would put my sunglasses on, keep them on, go home, and then as soon as I was home, I would slip into bed, put on my blackout shades on my windows, put in the earplugs, put on the face mask, and pass out. And so you're almost simulating a nighttime effect to help tricking that circadian rhythm. Another thing too is try and limit your shift changes. So if there's any way to, if you're going to be on an overnight shift, try and keep it that way. Don't let it fluctuate where some days you're on overnights and other days you're working days. That's going to really mess up your clock and you're never going to feel rested and comfortable. Doesn't matter how well adapted you are, it's not going to be fun. You're going to be miserable. I've done that. It is not pleasant. Now, what can you do to help with sleep no matter the circumstance? So ensuring your sleep hygiene is by far the most important thing. So all of those things we discussed, I would recommend employing those as much as possible because they're guaranteed to work. They've been well studied for many years. The data is sound. They work perfectly. Now, there are some over-the-counter things you can try. I don't recommend any type of sedative. So taking Benadryl, Tylenol PM, Advil PM, they're going to snow you. If you're over the age of 65, they can cause falls, they can cause a lot of confusion, behavioral disturbances. They're not recommended. So I never recommend them to anyone. In all honesty, even my young, healthy patients, I typically don't recommend it. I try to have them do those environmental changes, those sleep hygiene changes, well before trying anything like that over the counter. And a lot of times they don't really work that well. Now, melatonin has been around for a very long time. It is a hormone peptide that we have naturally in our bodies that we create. It helps us with our sleep-wake cycle. Some people can take melatonin an hour before bedtime, and it does help them sleep. It's mostly setting the time of when they should fall asleep. And so if they're taking, anywhere from 0.5 milligrams to 5 milligrams, that can set a pattern of at every night at 9 o'clock they're taking that 5 milligrams. The body then realizes, oh, this is my circadian time to sleep. And so then it can help induce sleep. Melatonin has also been used as an anti-inflammatory, and it has some other benefits. But for the most part, melatonin is pretty effective. There are some other natural supplements that some people have used. There's some data, it's not the greatest. It's safe in smaller doses, but there's something called valerian. Some primary care providers do recommend it. Others don't believe in its effects. The data that I've read, it shows at least that it's safe if you're getting a decent brand. Unfortunately, FDA does not regulate nutritional and dietary supplements and herbal supplements, so it's really hard to say what's a good one and what's not. But that is something that has been used, reduces anxiety, stress, and can help kind of sleep a little bit better. So that's another one that I've had some patients try over the counter that they've said helps. But melatonin is probably the one I would recommend the most as it has the most data behind it. Now the other thing, you can take a hot bath or do something relaxing like aromatherapy with lavender or chamomile before you go to bed. You can meditate. You can do some deep breathing exercises, or you can do something called 4-7-8 breathing, which is when you inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 7 seconds, and breathe out for 8 seconds. That can help lower the heart rate, de-stress, relax, calm yourself. If you find that's a little bit too rigid, you can also just do some meditation, prayer, deep breathing, imagery and visualization. So, closing your eyes, doing some deep breaths, and then picturing yourself in a very calm, relaxing environment, sitting on a nice, beautiful Hawaiian beach at sunset. You can feel the warmth in your skin, you can feel the sand in your toes, you can hear the ocean. Sometimes that alone can help people fall asleep. Another thing you can try is progressive muscle relaxation. This has been fairly well studied. It's easy, it's cheap, and it's side effects free. And basically, you can certainly look this up online. There's a bunch of YouTube videos and resources online where it'll show you how to do progressive muscle relaxation. But basically, it involves deep breathing, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And then you slowly contract a single muscle group, and then you slowly relax it. And then you move from head to toe and then toe to head. And when you do this, you're almost massaging your own muscles. You're taking your mind off of all your worries from the day, and you're allowing your body to relax. You're allowing your mind to de-stress and remove all stressors and focus on the wrong things and just concentrate on your breathing and muscles. And so that actually has been extremely helpful for a lot of my patients who have a tough time falling asleep. What to do if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't fall back asleep? So cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is one of the best things for insomnia. It's not a quick fix like Ambien or Lunesta or all these other pills you see on TV or read in magazines, but it is one of the most effective means of treatment. If you can find a CBT certified therapist or counselor, I would highly recommend it, especially if sleep has been something that's been very difficult for you to manage on your own. It's very easy. You're becoming mindful of your response to sleep and how to overcome those thoughts of worry, to retrain your brain on how to de-stress and focus on falling asleep. So, to help with waking up and not being able to fall back asleep, one of the best things to do is, if you can't fall asleep after waking up in the middle of the night,
Hey, are you awake?
Yeah.
after about 10 or 15 minutes of just lying there trying to fall back asleep, get out of bed immediately and remove yourself from the bedroom. If you do that, do something very mind-numbing. Read a book, read a magazine, wipe off your kitchen counters,
Wax on. Wax off.
fold laundry, do it in a quiet, dark, low-lit environment. Obviously it needs to be lit. We don't want you tripping, falling, and hurting yourself. But, sit on the couch, read a book. And then as soon as you start to feel that urge of wanting to sleep, your head nodding, your eyes slowly closing, everything slowing down, go back to bed. If you can't fall asleep within another 10 to 15 minutes, get out and do the same thing. And keep doing that until you fall asleep. And you will fall asleep. There's been many studies showing that this is a very effective means of going to bed after you've woken up. The other thing you can do is kind of retrain your brain on how it thinks about your bedroom and your bed. If you're the type of person who spends all day in bed, or you read in bed, you're on your phone in bed, you're on your computer, you watch TV, whatever it is, don't do it. You want your brain to associate your bed with one of two things. I told all my patients this. Sex, yep, I said it,
Hey! Look at that!
and sleep. And if you only do those two things in your bedroom, in your bed, your brain will eventually recognize your bed as a trigger for sleep. And so if you do that over and over and you're not using your bedroom for anything other than those two things, you will have a better sleep. You're training your brain for routine and pattern, what it loves the most. And so by doing that, you will most often associate your bed with sleep, so that once you crawl into those covers, you're out cold. So, you've tried everything. You've done all those sleep hygiene things. Your room is dark, cold, quiet. You have given yourself an hour of quiet time with no electronics or screens. You have taken that hot bath. You've done your routine. You've set your time for waking and sleeping. You haven't changed anything on the weekend. You've done all these measures. You still can't sleep. What do you do next? Well, I would really urge you to go to your primary care provider. They can figure out if there's something else going on that may be more serious, or it might need to be treated in some other way that's a little bit less conservative, a little more aggressive, especially if it's starting to affect your social relationships, your work relationships, or your productivity in general. If you feel as though your mental or physical well-being is deteriorating because you're not getting adequate sleep, you need to talk to your primary care provider. They may send you for a sleep study. They may do some lab work and check some blood tests to see if there's anything going on, like your thyroid or testosterone levels. Or they might even send you to a sleep specialist to see if there's anything else going on. There are these rare conditions out there that do exist, that some people have, that keep them up and prevent them from sleeping properly. So definitely call your primary care if your sleep is becoming an issue and it's getting in the way of your day-to-day life. All right, guys. I've talked about sleep, I've talked about the things to look for, I've talked about why it's important to get sleep. So get those 7 to 8 hours, do all those sleep hygiene tips, find a CBT therapist or read about it at least to learn some of those tips and tricks. And there's only 2 things you're meant to do in bed: sleep and have sex. So I'm signing off, guys. I'm Matt the Bowtie Guy. Talk to you soon.